But welcome everyone. My name is Jessica Medina. I am a former lawyer turned accredited financial counselor, and I love doing these Zoominars every month on different financial topics. And I'm so excited to have my guest, Rho Thomas. She is also a practicing attorney, but has a very different financial story to mine. And so I'm looking forward to learning more about that and digging in on her story and her FIRE journey. Just to give you a sense of how today is going to go, we have 45 minutes together, and I have a lot of information that I want to share. As many of you know, financial literacy is one of my core values as an accredited financial counselor. So I always like to give you some real education in addition to hearing the stories and being able to chat amongst ourselves about, how we feel about whatever's going on with our money. So we're going to spend a little bit of time in the beginning and just go over some FIRE principles together. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own journey and how I got to where I am. And then we get to hear from Rho and hear about her story and where she is on her path right now. And then we're going to open it up to everyone else. I definitely saw a lot of comments as this was being advertised that people had stories of their own. I would love to hear them. I think everyone's FIRE journey is different, and it's important to hear those different stories. And then, to the extent that we have time, we will, of course, also open it up for questions that you guys have. And I will be honest, I'm so into FIRE, I can totally stay more than 45 minutes if you guys want to. But you are also more than welcome to hop off at the designated time. So without further ado, let me just get into my slides. So welcome, we're talking about FIRE today. And if you guys are not familiar, FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. So the financial independence movement at its core is really about creating circumstances in which your money, that is your money, can sustain you whether you're working or not, or working in a different capacity than you are right now. And so it gets a lot of flack because there are many in the FIRE movement who are super, super frugal. These are the rice and beans for 5 years, folks. And that is a lot of the lore that goes along with FIRE. But there are different ways that you can implement it. And especially as a professional that was working in a very high stress and overwhelming job and career, those types of principles just did not apply to my life. But when I found the FIRE movement, I realized that this could be my ticket out of the law. Look, there are things that I loved about being a lawyer. I certainly love other lawyers, which is why I serve them now and I surround myself with them constantly. That being said, it was pretty stressful, and I am a counselor at heart, and I was a litigator, which was just so adversarial for me. It was just really, really hard for me to be living that life every day. What I do now, I absolutely love. I basically just help people with their money and help them get to where they want to go, and that is a much better fit for me. But the only reason why I'm able to do this is because I prepared for it. So in the FIRE movement, there are lots of financial indicators that you'll hear about. And I want to say there's a lot of math involved in the FIRE movement. You're going to see a lot of articles and tips and strategies that have percentages and multipliers and all kinds of financial indicators. But one of the most important indicators in the entire concept of FIRE is your savings rate. And you may have heard of this before. This is basically figured out. You figure it out by taking all of the money that you are putting towards your future and you divide it by your after-tax income. That is your savings rate. That's basically what percentage of your take-home pay are you actually putting toward the future day as opposed to spending on your life right now. And savings rate, people calculate it in different ways. I'm going to show you how I do it so you can do it yourself. But this really is one of the most powerful financial indicators that you can find. It also is the best way to tell if you are suffering from what we call lifestyle creep. And every time you make a little bit more money, you spend a little bit more money. And watching your savings rate is actually a really great way to make sure that when your income or your earning potential expands, you don't necessarily let your lifestyle expand to fit that new income. You capture a little bit more of it. You either have the same savings rate or even larger, which would be amazing. And that gets you closer to financial independence. So let's talk a little bit more about some specifics. So for a savings rate, the way that I calculate it, I put in, you get credit for everything that you're doing that goes toward your future. Okay, so you get credit for those pre-tax savings that come out of your paycheck before you even see it. You get credit for anything that you're putting toward retirement. You get credit for any investments that you're funding separate and apart from any 401k or other type of employer-sponsored retirement account that you may have access to. You also get credit for extra debt payment amounts, right? So anything above and beyond the minimum debt payment, I give you credit for that in your savings rate. You know why? Because future you will have a smaller debt load and you get credit for that. And that really can make a huge difference of what your future financial obligations will be. So we put in anything above and beyond the minimum. You don't get credit for the minimum payment though. That you got to pay anyway. And then the last thing is any other savings that you might be doing. But it needs to be savings toward your future, not saving for a trip that you're going to take. That's basically saving money that you're going to spend. We're looking at things that are going to be able to help fund your future you so that you can do whatever you want. But those all go into that top numerator number. And then on the bottom, we're going to take your after-tax income. But so make sure that you pull back in all of those pre-tax deductions that might be coming out of your paycheck, but you should still get credit for those in your after-tax income as well. Generally speaking, the typical guideline is everybody likes to see you at around 20% savings rate. Many of us do not start there. Many of my clients certainly do not start there. But what you typically see in America is a savings rate closer to 3%. That's why we have people living paycheck to paycheck. That's why we have folks who can't afford a $1,000 emergency. When you're saving so little of your money toward your future and everything is going toward your present day, it can be very hard to think about a future where you don't have to be working just as hard as you're working now. FIRE blows that up completely and really stands finance guidelines on their head to get you out of whatever it is you don't want to be doing faster. So under the FIRE analysis, the savings rates are way different than what you would typically see, right? So if you wanted to be retiring, right, this is a full retirement, this is living off of your nest egg, basically. To do that in 20 years, you need to be saving 45% of your after-tax income. That's a far cry from 3%. It's a real far cry from even 20%. So it is a change, but these are the kinds of savings rates that you start to get to in the FIRE movement. If you wanted to be retiring in 15 years, that's 55% of your take-home pay. 10 years, 65%. You can see these things are going up and up and up. 5 years is 85%. And the reason why you have such a huge jump when you go from 10 years to 5 years is because part of how we would be funding your retirement is through the growth of whatever investing you're doing. If you're trying to get out of the workforce in 5 years, you're not giving yourself very much time to let anything grow. So you really have to be capturing a fair amount of what you're bringing home. But I wanted to make sure that I spoke with all of my attorneys about a part of the FIRE movement that doesn't get as much advertising as some of these full retirement scenarios. And this is what I call the simmer, right? These are different FIRE concepts that I think really apply much better to high income earning professionals, really any professionals, because you will have some income to work with. And it's really a question of, if you're just unhappy with your job, but you don't want to stop working forever, that's a very different way to think about financial independence than I want to retire on my nest egg alone for the rest of my life. That requires a lot. You have to have a pretty big nest egg, especially depending on how long you're going to live. But with some of these simmer, the simmer techniques, it's not that extreme. So one that you might hear about is barista FIRE. Barista FIRE is basically the concept that, you can retire on your nest egg, but you're going to get a job at Starbucks and you're going to earn, some small salary over the course of the rest of your life that is going to help supplement the withdrawals that you take from your retirement nest egg. The other one that is my personal favorite is Coast FIRE. So Coast FIRE basically means you're going to fund your investments and your retirement nest egg to a point such that by its natural growth over the next couple of decades, it will get you to a point where you can retire on that money, but you will stop making contributions to it in the meantime. And because retirement savings can be such a huge portion of your spending budget, right? If you're doing it right, you really are putting a lot of money toward your retirement. If you didn't have to be saving that money, then you could maybe take a reduction in income, maybe reduce your hours, maybe get a different job that still pays to support your lifestyle, but doesn't have to pay to support your retirement. And that can be a material difference, especially in the legal world. So you're basically going to be reducing your living expenses by cutting out your retirement savings obligation, and you're going to delay taking your withdrawals on any retirement nest egg you have. You are going to, take out those 401k funds when you are retirement age, but you won't have to keep contributing it to it toward, for so much of the later part of your working career. So it lets you get a better job, maybe a different job, something that you're more interested in doing, and you're really just working to support your lifestyle, whatever that lifestyle looks like. So a really important concept for savings rate is to understand that reducing your expenses is one of the most powerful things that you can do when it comes to your savings rate and when it comes to reaching FIRE as quickly as possible. And the reason why that is, let me just give you the example, right? If you have a savings rate of 0%, you're basically saving nothing for retirement. You're never going to be able to retire, right? You have absolutely nothing that you're putting away. You're at zero. If you are saving 100% of your income, then you don't need income to retire. You can just retire. You're there immediately. The more that you can increase your savings rate, the more that you're saving now, that not only means that you are able to build your nest egg faster right now with funds from today, it also means that future you will have a life that costs less because you have shed some of those obligations. So your nest egg has less of a life to support, which means you need less money in that nest egg in order to support your lifestyle. So although I am a big fan of my clients looking for ways to earn additional income, if that's even possible, I have to tell you, I work with high-powered attorneys. Picking up an Uber job to drive people around nights is not an option. You're already working 24 hours a day. Some of them do have side gigs. I will say that. And my goodness, more power to you if you have time for that. Rho is a wonderful example. But most of the clients that I work with, earning more income other than, graduating to partner or just doing more legal work, right? Doing more demanding legal work are really the only options. And so finding, second jobs or those things that other personal finance books will tell you to do if you really want to change your financial situation, that just doesn't apply to my clients. So I don't tell them to do it. Instead, we look for things that we could be reducing in terms of our expenses for the second note that this does double duty and we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck to the extent that we can do it. So some actual client examples, right? I never trust anybody unless they tell me like something that actually worked for someone, right? These are savings rate jumps that I got my clients that I've actually worked with. I've been working with folks since 2018. Now I focus on lawyers for sure, but some of my non-lawyer clients are actually on this call right now. So I don't just work with lawyers. But I had one who was new to FIRE. He had never heard of it before. And when we sat down and we met and I explained to him how it works, his mind was blown. And he was just like, this is absolutely what I want to do. If you're telling me that I can get out of my job in the next 10 to 15 years, I'm in. Tell me, Jessica, what do I have to do? And this is what he had to do. He was already saving 21%. He was a single guy. He worked in the software space, which I will say is very typical of the FIRE movement. That being said, while we were working together, he upped it to 54%. He's on his way to FIRE. He did have to give up a Tesla dream that he had in the middle. We'll see if we can fit that in at a future time, depending on, how his income comes out. But he can get that Tesla later if he really wants to. He decided it was more important to him that he be able to do whatever he wanted with his life rather than get that car now. And that's a personal choice. And when it is the choice of my clients, I just try to figure out a way to get them to that point. I had another couple who were very FIRE familiar. They were on a financial independence journey already, but they were only at about 22% in terms of their savings rate. And we made a couple of moves within their financial picture. We got them up to 30%. They're reducing their fixed expenses. They refinanced their mortgage. They got rid of one of their cars. There's a lot of different things that we can do if we really take a look at what your financial situation is. there's always some flexibility in there. And that's one of my jobs, is to bring an outside perspective so that you can see what's going on. And the last example I wanted to give is another, a single lady that I've been working with. She's wonderful. She started at 23%. She was doing very well. But I want to tell you, she had an 80% savings rate in December, which was just, it was such a proud moment. So proud. She took her entire bonus and stuck it toward her long-term savings. And she's still at 50% for January, right? So new year, everything is kind of new, but she's still staying on track. So, being able to work with somebody who understands these concepts and can help you think through your own money situation can really be very powerful. Because I do want to give a warning. There's a lot in the FIRE movement out there. There's a lot of blogs. Some of them are very scary and frightening to go through. And I would love to hear from Rho what her impression is of the entire movement. But working with someone really can help you get a handle on things so that you can really see your future clearly and start making choices along what's really important to you. And I know people always ask me, well, Jessica, what about your numbers? Tell us about how you did what you did. There's a lot of reaction to my post about how I basically took a $165,000 pay cut when I left the law, which is totally true. But so I really subscribed to Coast Fire. That made the most sense for me. I was working in big law, and then I was working at the Securities and Exchange Commission. I didn't really feel like I could do some of the really extreme things that people talked about. I wasn't going to move into a one-bedroom apartment with my two twins. So what we did is we just applied some of the principles. I ended up paying down all of my high interest debt. So I had no credit card debt. I had no other consumer debt. But I did keep all of my very, very low interest debt. So I had private student loans. Many of you know that I graduated from Columbia with over $200,000 of student loans. And I have to tell you, when I left Big Law to go to the SEC, I hadn't made that big of a dent. I really hadn't. I was just kind of treading water while I was at my law firm, and I was making a lot of money then. I wasn't handling it very well. But when I went over to become a financial regulator myself, I thought, I probably need to manage my money a little bit better. Also, I don't want to do this anymore. So I was paying 3 times my minimum student loan payments on my private loans. I was focusing all of my attention there while still getting my retirement matches. And at the SEC, they have wonderful programs to retain all of us very smart lawyers. And one of them is helping with student loan repayment. So they were paying my government loans over the course of the year. They were actually making a bigger dent than I was. And so they brought down the balance for me a little bit, but I still have federal student loans. I have around $35,000 of them still, and I will keep them as long as I need to because they're at 1.75%, and that's like free money. So I'm not going to pay those suckers off until it's the last thing that I do. There's nowhere else I can get that kind of, well, actually, now I guess maybe I could with interest rates in the tank. That being said, it's something I keep. I'm perfectly comfortable, and I still get to have a lifestyle that I want. I also spent a lot of time permanently shedding whatever expenses I could. This was one of the core principles that FIRE proposes, and it really is very powerful. So I refinanced my mortgage a couple of years after I had gotten my townhouse, which, basically I have a monthly payment that is now lower than it was when I started. I bought my car with the last firm bonus that I got. I paid cash, which was so exciting. And the dealer was very upset with me. He definitely wanted me to finance it. But that was also the last car that I bought. I have not had a car payment in years. My children grew. Okay, this is a natural phenomenon. Parents will recognize it. They're not like dogs. Eventually, they don't need as many services. And so childcare was no longer an expense over time. I also was able to do some work and actually shop around in terms of subscription rates, cable rates. I lowered my health insurance premiums by picking a plan that worked for my family that was just cheaper every month. And like I said, I was working toward Coast Fire, so I was contributing to my retirement, but I knew that at the end of the journey, that would not be an expense that I needed to include in my lifestyle cost. I also want to say, full disclosure, you all know that I started as a single mom graduating from Columbia. I did meet my husband eventually, and we got married in 2018. It was very wonderful, but marriage does have its benefits. So I don't want you all to leave here thinking, oh gosh, Jessica got to leave the law and she took her $165,000 pay cut and now, she just has her financial coaching business and that's how she survives. That's not true. I'm married. My husband has a job, and his job actually replaces the income that I planned to bring in on my own as a single mom. So my FIRE plan involved me being able to leave the practice of law the way that I understood it. High stress, super overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, I hate this. Why do I have to go in every day? To go do something else. I still planned on earning money. I just planned on earning money doing something that I really, really enjoyed, something that was really fulfilling. And now instead, my husband gets to enjoy his job. He does something that's very fulfilling. He is not an attorney. He's former military. To be fair, he's going back on active duty because of the pandemic, which we're dealing with. But the money that he was bringing into the home now replaced the income that I would have brought into the home. And that's what we live off of. It's not my lawyer's salary, but it's enough because, I never intended to live off of my nest egg at 40 years old, but I did plan to work a lot less. And now he just does the work for me. So I get to work with you guys as much as I want. But that's my story. And I want to, let me stop sharing this screen so I can get Rho's face a little bit bigger. And we are going to save some time for questions and all of that, but I do want to make sure that Rho has time to get through all of her story because it is fascinating and it's so exciting to hear about. So Rho, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself before I start grilling you with questions.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Rho Thomas. I am a practicing lawyer, as Jessica mentioned. I'm a trademark attorney in big law, and I'm also a financial coach for lawyers. And like Jessica, I typically serve lawyers. I have a few non-lawyer clients, but my aim is to serve other people who are similarly positioned to me. And we can get into my stories. I think that's a good lead in, Jessica, but do you have a specific question?
Well, but first I want to know how you learned about FIRE.
So it all started for me back when my first child was born, back in 2016. And I was preparing to head back to work after my maternity leave in 2017. I was a third year associate at the time. And like I was your like typical junior associate, like I am in it, I'm down, I'm billing, like I think our requirement at the time was 1850 or 1900. I billed like 2100, that kind of associate. I remember as a first year, I went to my team leader and told him like, yeah, so I want to be a partner. Like, what do I need to do that? Like, tell me all the things. He's like, all right, so first let's learn how to be a good associate, and like gave me, those kinds of tips. But like, just to paint the picture for you, like that's what I was coming into motherhood with. And so I had my child, I'm headed back to work and realizing like, the way that I practice law doesn't really allow me to be the kind of mom that I've always envisioned being. Like, maybe I can't really be there all the time if I also want to be present for my kid. And so that prompted my husband and me to sit down and really look at our finances. We had looked at it a little bit before, like, of course, we knew that we had student loans and that kind of thing. I had seen some stories of people paying their loans off quickly, but we didn't really have an idea of how much we owed. And so when we sat down, we realized that we were over $670,000 in debt with a negative $342,000 net worth. And so I started looking into how to pay things off. First of all, I was going back to work, right, full time. There was no change being made there. But I started looking into like how we can pay it off. And some of those stories that I saw of people paying their debts off really quickly were from people who were either in the FIRE movement or kind of FIRE adjacent. And so eventually I stumbled upon Mr. Money Mustache, who I suspect that might be who you were talking about before when she mentioned,
Could be.
possibly. She mentioned how some people are like very much like, just cut everything. You just live on ramen noodles. What do you mean you own a car? Just ride your bike in the rain. Like, and so I was like, whoa, like that was kind of crazy. But I also came across stories of people who were more reasonable. I saw people who weren't making as much money as I was bringing in, who were doing a lot better with their money. One story that I've talked about before is a couple both of whom were teachers, and they paid their house off in 5 years. And I'm like, wait a minute, like we're paying houses off in 5 years, and here I am with, over $500,000 in debt. Like what did I miss, right? So I just dove headfirst into the FIRE movement and all of that when I saw the freedom and flexibility that it could provide. But like you, Jessica, I'm not down for like the rice and beans, like just walk everywhere, like cut your lifestyle to the bone type of thing. My husband and I also aren't interested in the retire early piece. So we subscribe to the financial independence piece. And so the idea that we could be independent of our jobs, like not reliant on that income, we felt would give us so much more flexibility in how we choose to spend our time.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, sometimes people do focus on the retire early part, but certainly the part that brought me in. I didn't understand what financial independence meant. I didn't care. Somebody told me that I could retire early. I was, okay, that sounds wonderful. Yes, thank you. But tell me, what was the hardest part about making some of the changes? Because I have to imagine, you had been living a certain type of life, right, to get where you were beyond just being completely educated professionals, as you and your husband were. What were some of the hardest changes that you had to make through on your journey?
I think the biggest shift for us was just paying attention to our money because, like, you know how it is. You've got money coming in, the money's there, so I can spend it. Like, my bills are covered. We were even saving a little bit. Like, we were maxing out our retirement accounts at that point. So I think, like, that first year, we maxed out our retirement accounts. And I think I'm such a nerd. Like, the contribution limit, I think, was 18,000 at that. Like, y'all don't care. But anyway, so we were doing that, but then everything else was just kind of being spent and we weren't keeping tabs on where we were spending it. So it's like, oh, we've got this money coming in. Where did it go? Like, at the end of the year, you do your taxes and it's like, oh, it says that we made this much, but I don't know where that is. And
I don't
so,
remember that money coming in. That doesn't
right.
sound familiar. That went to someone else. And to be fair, a lot of people,
Exactly.
especially when you're when you're working at a firm, and it really does. The taxes are horrible. But was your husband completely on board? Was he into it?
Nope. He was not. So my husband was very much like, even before the FIRE piece, like just the paying the debt off early piece, he's like, everybody has student loans. Like, what do we can just pay the minimum. Like, we've worked hard to get here. We should live our lives. Like, he was not on board at all until, and I should say, we started having that conversation about paying off our debt before we had our kid. And so until I was able to sit down and tell him, like, look, this is how I'm feeling. Like, this is what I see. Like, if we can get a handle on our finances, then I see that we can have the freedom and flexibility to do the things that we want to do, to spend time with our kids the way that we want to, and not have our lives dictated by our jobs. And so when I put it that way, as opposed to just like, oh, I want to pay our loans off quicker, then he got it, right? Like, talking about the why behind what you want to do instead of just the what, the mechanics of it, was so important for us.
I so subscribe to that, because it wasn't until I had literally the fire lit under my butt that I could leave the law entirely, right, and go do something else with my life, working,
Mm-hmm.
but still doing something else with my life. That was the only thing that motivated me to actually start paying attention, right? And I was at
Yes.
the SEC, like, really? That's not going to get you to pay attention to your money? I don't know what's wrong with you. But it's just such a hassle, and you work so hard. Do you really have to track everything? But
Right.
when you're motivated, the techniques and the strategies feel very different than when someone is just telling you to, oh, well, make a spreadsheet. Full disclosure, my clients do not use spreadsheets, because, or some of the apps, because they're just too annoying. We figure out a way for them to manage their money that doesn't require that kind of upkeep. But oh, I had spreadsheets.
But,
I had spreadsheets.
oh, I was like, that hurts my heart because I love the spreadsheets. I'm all about the spreadsheets.
They're not for everyone, bro. They're not for everyone.
Yeah.
They're for you, though. I have 5,000 spreadsheets. Are you kidding? This is how I live my life. But tell me, where are you now, and like, how much further do you have to go until you get wherever you're going?
Yeah.
That is.
So we have hit Coast Fire. We're at the point where our retirement or investments will grow naturally to sustain us in retirement. We are still in debt, as you mentioned, having debt. Now, my student loans were not at whatever the low rate that you have. Like, I wish our student loans, I think the lowest was maybe 5.5%, something like that. And then on the high end, on the federal side, we had 7.9%. And then my husband also had one private loan at 9%. And so we have paid off over $400,000 of our debt. We are still working on my husband's debt, which I'm hoping to pay off in the next 12 to 18 months. It'll probably be closer to the 18-month side because I also recently dropped down to 50% at work, which is nice. I'm really glad to be able to do it, but it wasn't part of the plan. And you know how it goes when you got your plans, like you it was part of the plan, but down the line, like I knew that I wanted to work in a more reduced capacity, which was part of the fire plan for us. But the pandemic kind of shortened that timeline because I'm here with our two young kids. I've got a 4-year-old and almost 2-year-old, and my husband is still working outside of the home. And so it just wasn't sustainable.
So yeah, tell me, was there any trepidation in terms of you changing your work hours so dramatically? I mean, you cut by 50%. That's not, oh, I'll just go, I'll go down to 35 from, but like you work 40 hours. Yeah, I'll go to part-time. That's a big reduction. Was that an easy decision? Were you guys, oh no, we're here. We've been here for years. I could have done this, a couple of years ago if I wanted. Tell me about that.
So the trepidation more so came from me and the path that I saw for my career as opposed to the money. Like was not worried about the money side at all. Like we live on a very small portion of our income and like my whole salary for the most part has been going to paying off debt. Or you could say his whole salary has been going to paying off debt. I don't know, whichever you want to say. But like we have such a small or low cost of living expenses that I was not concerned about taking the pay cut. Like we are still doing really well. And we've got our savings and investments should we need to dip into them, but I don't foresee us needing to do that.
Isn't that so amazing when your
It
biggest
is.
worry is, how is this going to affect the trajectory of my career?
Yeah.
Rather than, am I going to be able to afford the life that I have created for myself? Right?
Right.
So
And that's what I was so grateful that we have done this work, because we've been doing this for the last 4 years. And to be in that position when I know that some of my friends, some of my colleagues are, not feeling that, right? Like they are stressed trying to figure out how to balance it all. I'm grateful that we have set our finances up to this way or in this way that we are able to make those kinds of decisions. And that was the whole point, right? To be able to make decisions that are best for our family as opposed to our jobs dictating what we do.
so everyone knows that I work with people and their money, but I don't know that everyone knows that Ro also helps people with their money. So tell me what you're doing
Yeah.
now, how you help clients, and how people can work with you.
Absolutely. So yes, like you have been working with people for a few years now, since 2018. But this past year in the pandemic, I decided I wanted to work with lawyers specifically, and I wanted to put myself out there more because before I was working more with like friends and family and friends of friends and that kind of thing. But I want to like spread this to more people. And so I work with clients on figuring out their debt repayment plans, on figuring out a path to fire, all of that, because my whole goal is to help people be able to regain control of their time, build wealth, and live the lives of freedom and choice they deserve. I say that all the time. And it's really important to me because it breaks my heart to hear people who feel stuck in positions that they don't want to be in anymore. Like, sometimes you talk with people in law who just feel like they can't afford to do anything else. Like you said, you can't afford to make changes because of the lifestyle that you've built. And so I want to help people not be there. As far as how to work with me, you can head to rhothomas.com/coaching, and I've got a whole page there. And then also you can check out my podcast. It's called Wealthy-esque, and you can find that at rhothomas.com/podcast.
Oh, it's very good. Ro, I'm going to let you put those links in the chat. And
Absolutely.
of course, I forgot to put my own links for anybody, who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn. If we're not connected already, that's where I hang out. You can see posts, and I also have my scheduling link in there if anybody's interested in talking to see if I would be a good fit for you. It's really important to me that all of my clients work with the right financial professional, whether that's me or someone else. And I know there were some investment questions in there, and I'm so glad that Rho was manning the chat while I was blabbing on and going through my slides, because I don't give investment advice. I worked at the SEC, believe me, I know where the lines are, but I can't help you with everything else. And you've already heard a little bit about what I do with clients, but I'm going to give you guys power back to unmute yourselves. So if you have, if you have a question, I would suggest you put it in the chat because those are easier for us to deal with. But if I know I had a couple of people who had stories of their own to talk about. We would love to hear them. We would love to hear what you've been through. And if you guys have, anything to share about your own fire journeys or how you'd love to get started, please feel free to chime in. All right, well, if no one comes.
I've got one. I see one of the comments while we were talking, someone was talking about tension between public service loan forgiveness and financial independence. Let's see, I will not put you on the spot, but I will say that my husband works for a company, a healthcare company, 501c3. And so he technically could go for public service loan forgiveness. We decided not to do that because we want to be free of the debt and working toward building wealth sooner. His was the bulk of the 670,000. Let's be clear. Like he had like almost 400,000. I had 100,000, then we've got 200 on our house. But we decided to continue to put more towards the loans and not worry about the public service loan forgiveness so that we could then focus on building our wealth. And he's at the 6.6%. And so, if his loans were at a lower rate like Jessica's, we might, try something different, or we might have decided something different. But because his loans are at such a high interest rate, we decided to just go ahead and pay them off.
Yeah, I definitely see a lot of clients that may have a mix of, federal and private, and that is always different than some of the newer clients that I have, or at least newer graduates. It's all federal. And when I graduated from law school, there was no forgiveness for anything under any plan. And so, it's a very different mindset, but it's important to take all that into account when you're coming up with your long-term planning. We did have the questions for, basically what is the first step in the fire journey? And, I think part of what you want to figure out, we've been talking about savings rate as you take, all of the money that's going toward your future and you divide it by your after-tax income that you have right now. That gives you your savings rate for right now. And all of those fire markers, apply to if you were going to have the income that you have now. And that's what you needed to support your lifestyle. I always want to take my clients through an exercise to figure out, what would your life actually cost if you were to become financially independent? Would you be able to move? Would you have, less living expenses? This comes up a lot in the realm of golden handcuffs and the different types that might exist. And one of the things that I always try to get my clients to think about is, how much does it cost you to just have your job? How much money do you spend so that you can work where you work? Because you will not spend that money when you no longer work there. And it's important to back those out when you're thinking about, okay, what is my future living expenses budget going to be? And if that's my budget, now what is my fire number? It could be very different than what your fire number looks like if you are requiring yourself to still be bringing in an income commensurate with what you make now. So I think the most important step for fire is actually getting really excited about it and wanting to explore it more, and being open to creative solutions that you might not have thought of before. But I also want to open it up to Rho if she has thoughts on kind of what her first steps were, or where she thinks people should start if they're interested.
I think the first step is getting a big picture of where you are. And so I'd say calculate your net worth. Look at everything that you own, all of your, retirement accounts, your savings accounts, anything like that. And then look at everything that you owe anywhere, figure out what your net worth is. And then from there, like Jessica said, you can look at things like your expenses, one that you already have, and then two expenses that you want to have or you think you'll have in the future. And Jessica, have we talked about how to actually calculate your fire number?
Oh, not the overall fire number. Yeah, you want to
Yeah.
go on that?
Yeah, so you will look at what you expect your expenses to be, and then you multiply that number by 25. There is a rule called the 4% rule. It's based on like a whole study and all of that. But basically, if you withdraw 4% of your retirement account, then, or your investment account, whatever it is, then you will not run out of money in your lifetime, or theoretically, you should not run out of money in your lifetime. And so to back into that, then you take the number or your expenses that you expect to have, multiply that by 25, and that will be your fire number.
And
I
that,
see also, let's see,
that.
really good comment about quantifying a purchase as an amount of time you have to work extra is one thing that really stuck with this person.
Your money or your life.
Yeah, that's so good. And when you were talking about that, like how much it costs for you to work your job, that reminded me a lot of Your Money or Your Life as well. There was a movie, a documentary, and a book in the last few years that might be what Stephen was talking about. It's called Playing with Fire. It's a couple who found fire for the first time. Actually, I think they found Mr. Money Mustache, but they found fire for the first time and, you know, just were mind blown. And so the book and the documentary kind of like go through, like follow them as they try to figure out how to reconfigure their life to achieve fire. So that's something that you guys might be interested in if you want to learn more about fire.
Yeah, tell me, Ro, what kinds of, if you can remember, gosh, now it feels like it must have been so long ago. What kinds of specific changes did you and your husband make to your lifestyle to, try to change, other than just tracking it, right? What kind of specific changes did you make that really affected how much your life cost?
The main thing was getting on a budget because we didn't have a budget at all before. We also ate out a lot. And so we cut back on that and just like paid attention to how much we were doing it. And then, like you said, not having a car payment. So I had a car payment still. My husband did not at the time. And we paid my car off. And then we got another car. And this goes back to what we were talking about with not subscribing to the like just live as cheaply as you can. Back in 2019, we had our second child. My husband was driving a coupe at the time. And so we could not fit all of our family of four now into the coupe. And he wanted a newer car. And so we got an SUV. So he wanted an SUV. It's actually an Infinity SUV because, he really wanted that. But our compromise was we wouldn't get the brand new one, right? So I think it's a 2016. And similar to you, well, I guess not similar to you because you paid yours in cash, but we came in and we got the shortest loan term that we could, which also qualified us for the lowest interest rate. I think our interest rate was something like 1%, but we just went ahead and paid it off. And so now we don't have car payments again. And so that like keeping your food, your transportation, and then your housing in check, like the big three is what we call them in the personal finance and fire communities. Those types of things give you much bigger wins than like not having your Starbucks every day. I really hate when I hear like, don't drink lattes and eat avocado toast, and then in 50 years, then you can retire. Instead, focus on making those big wins, like cutting your housing costs where you can, refinancing your mortgage like Jessica did, or like if you're in the market for a newer house, maybe you don't go to the top of what your person tells you can afford. Like our people were like, oh yeah, you guys can afford like $800,000. And I was like, and eat the floor. Like, what do you mean? So like keeping those things in check and then just watching your food and transportation are really going to move the needle a lot more than those smaller daily purchases.
Yeah, I love when I can get my clients to a point where hopefully, they're starting to look at those what we call they're fixed expenses, but they're not really fixed because we can, there is wiggle room. I had a client who I was just meeting with. We were going through her stuff, and it looked like her car insurance was pretty expensive, and it was. She's saving over $150 a month on her car insurance now, but just because she had never thought to shop around, right? But
Yes.
when you're really motivated, oh man, then all the lawyer comes out. And then you're
You
negotiating.
can negotiate anything. You really can.
It really is the prime community for fire, right? I mean,
Yes.
these are all folks very smart, very organized, very detail oriented, and can negotiate the heck out of everything, right? If we can harness the power, we can all do it.
Sarah said, how long did it take you to get here? 2017, right? If that's directed to me, Sarah, yes, we started. It's almost exactly 4 years because I went back to work January 13th, 2017. We started looking at it at the end of 2016, so like December or so. But yeah, about 4 years.
Oh, and Deidre, I know that you had a story to share. I would love to hear from you. Let me just let everyone know we are past 2:15, but like I said, I can talk about fire all day. So I'm happy to stay on here, but if anyone needs to roll off, we will be sharing the recording tomorrow. You have the links in terms of if you want to reach out to me or to Rho. And, thank you so much for joining us. This is a passion for both of us. We love chatting about it. It's always hard to, limit our time. We want to talk about fire, but we thank everybody for joining us. But if you want to stay on, we're happy to keep taking questions for as long as possible. But I would love to hear from Deirdre because I know that she has a story and if she wants to unmute herself. Oh, okay. Maybe she's on another webinar while she's on this one too.
Well, while we see if
questions from a
not in here.
Have you found the best way to increase income is to change jobs versus staying for years in the same job and getting raises at a small or medium-sized firm? That's a good question. I unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, I was a big law lawyer. So it was pretty lockstep. The only change in income we had access to is whether we were going to qualify for our bonus or not. When I changed jobs, it actually was to take a huge pay cut to go to the government. But I'm not sure if Rho, if you have thoughts on kind of, is it better to try to earn more income by jumping ship completely or by staying, kind of where you are? Oh, and are you muted? Oh my goodness. This is what I get for being the host of my own Zoominar. Okay, Deirdre is unmuted. There we go. I think.
I was gonna say that might be what happened to Deirdre too.
That could be what happened to me.
Okay,
so Deirdre, please share your story, and then I can. Well, I will say I don't have much to add to that point because I've been in big law since I started. Been at the same firm since I was a summer associate. But I do think that a lot of times changing jobs allows you to get those higher pay bumps than getting the raises at your current job. And there is a woman, I think her site is like her first 100K, and she talks a lot about negotiating those pay raises as you change jobs, if you want to check that out.
All right, Deirdre, you've been given power.
Okay, so first of all, I want to say, Jessica, Rho, you are my people. I loved listening to this. And I can ramble, so cut me off when I've said too much. I had never heard of fire before, but that's exactly what I did. So what I want to say to people, and I'll share a little of my story, is start now, like start this minute or yesterday if you can, because it is so, so powerful. I had a little bit of good mentorship early on, and my husband and I intuitively knew about this. And we started this 30 years ago. I mean, think about that. Some of you were like barely born. So we started this a long time ago. There was no internet. We just did it. So what we were able to do is actually create a life of financial freedom. So when I was in law school, well, actually, when I got my first job, and I was never in big law, and I live in Albany, New York, so we're not talking big money. So when I had my first job, and I had just gotten married, and we were buying our house, we actually needed a letter. It was so embarrassing, from the senior partner. We had to bring that to the bank to get our mortgage, showing that when I passed the bar, because I hadn't taken the bar yet, I would get a pay raise. And we always stayed within our means. So the first house that we bought was our starter home. And 29 years later, we're still in it. And there's nothing, it's not a starter home. I just grew up on Long Island and then was in New York City. So in Albany, New York, it seemed like a starter home because of the dollar value, but actually it's a very nice 4-bedroom home in a nice neighborhood. So we'd always thought initially that we would move on and get a better home. But this home is a perfect home, and we were able to pay it off really early. So the first thing that we did is we were really aggressive with my student loans. I was the only one with student loans, and we paid them off. And then one of my bosses said to me early on, he said, never stop paying your car payment. And I said, I don't have a car payment. And he said, it's the principal. So if you're making payments, when the payments are paid off, never stop making that payment. Take that money and sock it away, save it, invest it. So I took that advice, and we've aggressively saved. We never were like, ramen noodle people, and we've had a very nice lifestyle. But we were always mindful of saving our money and putting our money to work for us and living within our means. So I've had that Tesla dream, and I could buy the Tesla, but I'd rather invest the money. And I have dreams someday of maybe, a different home, but it won't be my primary different home. It will be like a second home somewhere. So I just like to say to people, just be aggressive and do it. Follow these principles because it will allow you freedom. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, I love that. I think, right, keep your car payment. Like, when you shed an obligation, don't replace it with something else. Make sure that, it's going toward your future, right? You were paying it toward your past, and now you are paying it toward your future. But the trick is to just not use it for the present, right? That's one of the hidden secrets of FIRE. Don't spend too much money on the present. That being said, I think when people hear some of these principles, it can be hard to think, well, how could this possibly fit into my life? I have a lot of clients who have young children. I have a lot of clients who are new homeowners and are at the beginning of their mortgage, and are at the beginning of their student loan journey, which can look like a very, very long journey for many people. There are going to be times in your life where applying these principles religiously is very difficult and too painful and not worth it. That doesn't mean that we can't pick it up when that season of debt is a little relieved, right? When the kids get a little bit older, when you're not shelling out a mortgage for daycare, then we might be able to apply some of these principles a little bit better. But don't trash them thinking, well, this could never, ever work for me. I totally get it. This is why every personal financial plan I put together is completely tailored to my client situation, because we are all different. We do want different things. We do have different resources and different obligations, but it doesn't mean that we can't find a way to get you there. It just might be a little bit of a longer path than for, the single engineer who can save 50% of his income whenever he wants to. Your path might be a little different, but it doesn't mean that we can't get you there. Anyone else want to share? I'm oh gosh, does everybody have power to share? I so apologize for all the muting I've done all through the presentation. Oh yes, exactly. We have someone who's awaiting a $1,300 per month raise when his daughter goes to pre-K. Absolutely. It's not the mortgages, it's not the student loans, it's actually daycare that keeps us all where we are, right? This is why we work, so that our children can spend the day with someone else. This is exactly why we have the job that we do. Oh, harsh, but true. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Like I said, you're going to get a copy of this recording in your email, hopefully tomorrow, if I can, get my video editor on everything. And you have contact information for Rho. If you haven't stuck that in the chat, make sure you put a link in there so they can find you. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming. As you can tell, we're super excited about FIRE and we'd love to talk to you more about it. And I'm sure we'll be doing another one of these later this year to remind everybody and maybe to get into some more deeper concepts within the movement. So thanks for coming, and we will see you at the next Zoominar next month on Investing Basics.